Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour 25th Anniversary. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, joined by Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon. The three-headed monster has arrived, and we are ready to commentate the finals. The table is set, the players are ready. Let's head on down. It's time for the last round here from Pro Tour 25th Anniversary.
Oh, it's Lazy Helix! Oh my God!
Oh, easy game!
He didn't block and that was it!
What have you drawn? What is it? What is it? What is it? Huey Jensen is your world champion!
Hello and welcome back to coverage here at Pro Tour 25th Anniversary. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon, and we are ready for the finals. It is time to decide who is going to walk away from this thing with the trophy and the money. This is the biggest Pro Tour of all time. From a money perspective, $850,000 will be given out to the players, and these ones are vying for the biggest chunk of that. In our feature match area on the right-hand side of your screen, the team from channelfireball.com, Josh Utter-Leyton, Ben Stark, and Martin Jůza. On the other side from HotSauceGames.com, it is Alan Wu, Ben Hull, and Gregory Orange. We are playing team constructed here at the Team Pro Tour. That means each table is one format. The one closest to us is Legacy. That's where we'll be starting. And you see Alan Wu, he has been putting on a show with Death and Taxes, his weapon of choice for Legacy. He's been playing the deck for 5 years. He knows all the ins and outs, and he has had a lot of success in the feature match area with the deck. On the other side of the table, though, the Hall of Famer, Josh Utter-Leyton, known as Raptor to his friends. He's playing an innovative take on a blue-black Death Shadow deck. Luis, I really want to get your take on this. You played this deck in the tournament as well, so you know it better than anybody else.
This blue-black Death Shadow deck is disadvantaged game 1 against Death and Taxes, and that's the reason we have 3 Dread of Knights in our sideboard. However, Alan Wu did not have a 1-drop, which means he didn't have Mother of Runes or Aether Vial in his opening hand, and that's a big edge for Josh, because without Aether Vial, the deck is a little more constrained on mana, can't use the Recruiter of the Guard quite as effectively, and is just slower to get on board, and then that gives Josh the ability to kind of pick apart Alan's hand with Thoughtseize. So we're looking at a set of good cards here.
Yeah, one of the most important cards that we kind of saw, one of the swingiest cards, in fact, in the last match, because Josh Utter-Leyton did play against Marshall Carvalho, that was also in Death and Taxes, is Palace Jailer. And
I see a potential for a blowout here. If it's, well, the Flick Roast makes it tough, but if you Thoughtseize the Palace Jailer, and then next turn, Alan plays Thalia, you can then reanimate the Palace Jailer, exiling the Thalia, drawing a card off Monarch. Raptor decides that's just a little too rich for his blood.
right. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories about some of the juicier reanimate targets over the course of the weekend. What was one of the bigger creatures that you were able to take with the reanimate?
I played against a reanimator opponent whose turn 1 play on the draw was just discard Chancellor of the Annex with the intention of animating it on turn 2.
Oh my
I just
goodness.
went reanimate it, and then they just died. They never could play a spell. Josh did me one better, though. He actually cast a reanimate on Iona and named Black against the reanimator.
Oh, wow.
Hoisted by their own petard, as the saying goes.
Indeed. Here's Brainstorm now for Josh Utter-Leyton. I know he loves that artwork on that Brainstorm. He chose that for his token even.
And Brainstorm's really important. Again, you see a lot of Brainstorms and Ponders showing up in these Legacy decks, and the reason is that you get to play a lower land count because you have these cantrips that find you mana, but also shuffle away your lands when you already have 2 in the case of the Death Shadow deck. So you end up in a game where you just have 2 lands and like 9 spells, or over the course of the game, 10 spells. And that's a pretty big edge, and that's why a lot of people gravitate towards these blue decks. Something like the Death and Taxes deck that Alan Wu is playing, it doesn't have that advantage. Alan's at the mercy of whether his deck feeds him 2 lands and he gets stuck, or 7 lands and he gets flooded. However, some of the advantages are you get to play cards like Thalia, which really do punish people for casting cards like Brainstorm.
In the meantime, Josh has resolved his Brainstorm and put Delvar of Secrets on the battlefield. You got to figure it's likely to transform here after the... Oh, he must have shuffled. So he takes a look at it, and no transform here for the Delvar. So he's going to have to settle for just the 1/1, at least for now.
So what... Oh.
This is an on-point play by Alan. The question Paul was about to ask is, he was going to observe that Alan didn't play a 3-drop. He has multiple 3s.
Yeah.
Alan's playing around Daze, but doing so in a manner that I think is pretty conservative. When you have a lot of 3-drops in your hand, it feels like taking a whole turn off is a pretty big cost.
Yeah, especially facing a Delvar of Secrets on the other side. If Josh Utter-Leyton didn't deploy a threat that turn, I could see playing it a little bit slower and waiting to play around days by waiting till you hit your 4th land drop. But given that the Delvar of Secrets is on the battlefield, this might be a situation where Allons should just opt to play one of his creatures into a daze and follow that up with another card that can resolve on the following turn.
Allons has shown a propensity to play around days very consistently over the course of his time in the feature match area. He does not like getting dazed, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And that's a natural impulse, like getting dazed, feels bad. But I think that in this particular case, Allons essentially cost himself 3 mana.
Let's see if Josh can capitalize on that loss. Right now, he has it set up so that there's an Underground Sea, and then on top of that is Reanimate, so that he can potentially transform that Delver of Secrets next turn, though he does have a fetch land in hand as well. I also see a Thoughtseize. All right, so we're going to get another chance to look at what Wu is working with, and as you said, he just chose not to play anything last turn, but his hand, Palace Jailer, Recruiter of the Guard, and a Flicker Wisp, as well as a pair of Caracas.
I don't like playing on days quite as much in this situation, is that you have Palace Jailer, so to some degree you're vulnerable to days just on the Palace Jailer. Though I guess Allons could play his 5th land before playing his Palace Jailer, though he would lose a Caracas in the process. There is a drawback.
Right.
But I think Josh is not going to set up his Delver as much as set up a Death Shadow this turn. He goes to 13 from the Thoughtseize. He can go to 10 off of the Bloodstained Mire.
Yeah.
After Thoughtseizing potentially the Palace Jailer, because that's just the most powerful card, and then hoping that Allons does not draw Swords to Plowshares. He could also just flip his Delver this turn if he wants. But
yeah, Swords would be brutal if Allons did find a way to draw it. But of course, Allons also does have the option, Josh Utter-Leyton does have the option of not flipping Delver of Secrets if he is concerned about a Swords to Plowshares on a Delver of Secrets once it's flipped. Because Josh Utter-Leyton would be at 10 life, Delver of Secrets would turn into a 3-2, and then if Allons Wu has the Swords of Plowshares on the flipped Delver of Secrets, Josh Utter-Leyton would go up to 13 life and would lose a Death Shadow. So it looks like he's opting for just a Gurmag Angler here instead.
yeah, and Gurmag Angler is just a way to diversify your threats without being exposed, like you said, to Swords to Plowshares.
Once again, Allons Wu deciding to play around daze. He refuses to open himself up to getting dazed here.
That's one of the strengths of having the card Daze in your deck. Josh is getting a ton of value by having Daze without having to actually draw the Daze. When Allons plays around Daze and Josh doesn't draw it, then Allons gets a lot of value.
Should Josh take it
Josh
out
gets a lot of
in Game 3? If Allons going to play around it this hardcore, do you just take it out?
It's on the fence regardless, but I think you do keep it in because Allons is playing around it in a game where maybe he feels like he has enough time.
Okay.
But Josh is not always going to give Allons this much time.
Right. It was a consideration. And we saw how Josh sideboarded in previous matches where he did keep in some number of dazes and forcibles. I don't know exactly what his plan was going in post-board, but he did have a lot of really powerful spells to bring in. You saw the 3 Dread of Nights. You saw 2 Liliana the Last Hope. So something's got to give there.
Here's Street Wraith getting cycled now for Josh Utter-Leyton. Down to 10 life. He finds a Force of Will off the top of his library. Probably going to do a pretty good job of maintaining status quo. And right now, that looks good for Josh. He's the one with the 5/5. He was not able to transform that Delver after that shuffle, but perhaps his Ponder can help him do that next turn.
Does Josh have a Reanimate? Because
He shuffled it away.
Oh, because Josh did use the Thoughtseize to get rid of that Palace Jailer. So now it's a juicy target. If Josh does happen to find a Reanimate, he can get that Palace Jailer onto battlefield, become the Monarch, and draw an additional card every turn.
Yeah, he did have that line of play available to him, but he decided against it. That last turn, when he cracked that fetch land, he put a land and the Reanimate back on top of his library, deciding that he wanted to go a different route.
And the biggest drawback to that is that Flicker Wisp punishes Reanimate very hard. You Flicker Wisp whatever you got back, and then you end up in a spot where you get the creature back yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Josh happily trading Delver of Secrets with Recruit of the Guard here. Is there?
What's the reasoning for that?
I don't know. I don't know why Josh would do that. Except no. He's worried about Allons playing a Flicker Wisp next turn. He doesn't want the Recruit of the Guard getting flickered.
I see. He's trying to keep the value train stuck at the station here for Allons Wu.
So Allons Wu did get a very, very strong creature in this matchup. He did play the Recruit of the Guard and fetched out a Mirran Crusader, which has protection from black. So by having one of those, by having that creature on the battlefield, and if it resolves,
got to
Looks
force
like
it.
it's not going to, yeah.
But this does open up Josh a little bit here to Swords to Plowshares, does it not?
It does, but he thought these 2 turns ago, so he knows that, and he actually I think maybe has seen the Wasteland that got drawn, so he knows that that Alan didn't have swords, and swords on the Gurmag Angler doesn't actually kill the Death Shadow currently. Death Shadow can be big enough that it won't end up losing both creatures, so this puts Alan on a really fast clock.
Is this just lethal? So Josh is down to 7. He can crack the
Yeah,
fetch
it's
and go
actually
down
straight
to
up
4.
lethal. Drawing the Street Wraith was exactly what Josh needed to put his life total down to 4.
This is 14, right? Oh, wow.
It sure is. Josh Utter-Leyton takes a quick game 1 from Alan Wu with Death and Taxes. Of course, we're just getting things rolling here, but Josh, boom, up a game there for Team Channel Fireball. Take a look at our feature match area where we have everything else going on. We've got Modern, we've got Standard, we've got more Legacy, and we're going to have a Pro Tour champion for you in just a little while. We're going to come right back after these messages.
Always know the right play to make? Show off your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. With over 2,000 game stores worldwide running PPTQs, find an event near you at magic.wizards.com/PPTQ.
Welcome back to the feature match area here in Minnesota. Marshall Sutcliffe with Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon bringing you coverage of the finals. Down in the feature match, we have Tim Willoughby with an update.
Thank you, Marshall. We've already got 2 games completed on our back tables. Martin Jůza, he seems desperate to get through his game 1s as fast as possible. His second game 1 only took 2 minutes and 57 seconds in this top 4. Unfortunately for him, it did not go his way. Greg Orange on blue-white control had early Sealaways, an early Teferi, and Torrential Gearhulk able to seal things up very, very fast indeed for him. So that one going to Hot Sauce Games. And, well, Ben Stark, he had what he believed was going to be a turn 3 win, but he was on the draw. And, well, Ben Hull, he had a turn 3 win anyway on the play. A turn 1 Hollow 1, a Gurmag Angler on turn 2, big attacks, Bolt. That was enough to close things out. Team Hot Sauce Games picking up both game 1s, and we're going to get a chance to see game 2 between Ben Stark and Ben Hull.
Oh, boy, gentlemen, that sounds like some close games there, but 2 of them going to Ben Hull and Gregory Orange from Team Hot Sauce, and that means that it is time now for game number 2. I will remind you, if you're watching from home here, we are playing best of 5s in each of these matches, and the first team to win 2 matches wins the round, and in fact, the entire tournament. Inventors Fair kicks things off for Ben Stark. He's got an Ichor Wellspring as his follow-up play. He's going to draw a card off of that before passing the turn to Hull, who's done not a lot. He cycled a Street Wraith. He's played a couple of lands. Does he have a threat? Well, nothing yet. He's got a Goblin Lore, though.
This is the big turn. It looks like a Hull with a much slower draw this time around. You know, unless he can kind of put into play a couple of hollow ones here. Doesn't look like he's going to have the turn 3 this time around. Ben's hand is still a little bit on the slower side. He doesn't have that Mind Stone on turn 2. He is missing a Scrap Trawler, so he does need to go ahead and find that to get his combo going, as currently his hand is an Ichor Wellspring and a Karklan Ironworks.
In most of the games where Hollow One doesn't play a turn 1 Burning Inquiry or Faithless Looting, you can expect a turn 2 Goblin Lore.
Yeah.
Looks like Ben also has Ancient Stirrings in hand, so very well may be able to find that combo piece.
Yeah. And one of the lands in his hand is actually Darksteel Citadel, so if he can play out that turn 4 Karklan Ironworks, he has access to a lot of mana. It's very likely that he's going to play an Ichor Wellspring next turn, or he's going to lead off with, of course, the Ancient Stirrings. But if he plays the Ironworks, he has the ability to sack both the Ichor Wellsprings and the Darksteel Citadel for 6 mana.
All right, well, the end result of all of that, 2 Street Wraiths plus Goblin Lore, was a Hollow One. So it is a clock now for Ben Hull. He passes his turn back to Ben Stark, who's got that other copy of Wellspring, and then I'm assuming he's going to fire off the Ancient Stirrings.
And the reason to do it in that order is if Ben is reasonably confident he's casting Wellspring no matter what, he should draw a card off Wellspring and then have more information on what to draw off Ancient Stirrings, because that's the one that actually gives him choice.
So really looking for a Scrap Trawler, but of course he does have Inventor's Fair on the battlefield as well. If he can somehow stall out the game long enough where he can actually go search for the Scrap Trawler.
He actually drew one for his turn.
Ooh.
Or at least potentially off the Wellspring, but he has a Scrap Trawler in hand. So it looks like he has Scrap Trawler on KCI, so he's just looking for more fuel. Chromatic Star would actually be perfect. Mox Opal, still pretty good because it helps you generate a lot more mana every time you loop Wellspring into Star into Mox twice.
Right, he's got a ton of mana available by looping both the Mox Opal and the Ichor Wellsprings, and of course every time the Ichor Wellspring goes into the graveyard, you get to draw a card, which further increases the chances of Ben Stark finding some cheap mana rocks to cycle through.
That's right. Ichor Wellspring, not a key part of the combo in the sense that it's absolutely necessary, but it tends to be the card that they look for once they start going off because it gets them that much deeper into the library. While still generating mana, Ben is going to pass the turn back now. It is turn 3. Last time he found himself dead on this turn, but he's on the play. And it doesn't look like Hull's going to be able to kill him from this spot. So down to 16. Finally gets to knock some of the life total off Ben Stark's life pad there. Now what can Hull put out as far as pressure, or even better for him perhaps would be some disruption?
Well, because he discarded Burning Inquiry to the random discard of Goblin Lore, he's actually stuck without card draw here. So he can deploy more threats. He can play Tassiger Flameblade Adept, but he's not going to end up drawing a bunch more cards. So he's going to have a hard time finding one of his Ancient Grudges or Thought Seizes, which are the cards he most uses to disrupt Ben. Though this sideboard that Hull has constructed, Team Hotsauce Games has a very effective anti-KCI plan with 4 copies of Leyline of the Void in addition to the Grudges and Thought Seizes. Though I guess in game 1 he only has access to Collective Brutality in terms of disruption. So he's actually not really drawing to anything but speed in this particular matchup.
Right. We're in game 2, but it's the same thing as the game 1. We're going to start our sideboarded games after this one for these two. But they have to play it straight up.
One thing I will note, though, is just I have been incredibly impressed by the just sheer resilience of this Karklan Ironworks deck. We've seen this matchup before. We saw this yesterday, actually. Ben Hull playing against Ben Stark. And Ben Hull had a start of Leyline of the Void, Thoughtseize into Ancient Grudge with pressure, and lost.
He did. It was insane.
I mean, there's a reason that a lot of the members of the testing group, when you combine Channel Fireball and Ultra Pro, ended up playing KCI. It's that it does a really good job battling through hate, even though they all think it's worse than it was a month ago.
Right.
Because a lot more people are aware of it. But
because of Matt Nass?
Because of Matt Nass's victory in Las Vegas, actually, it made it significantly harder to end up winning. But it's still very good, even when people are prepared.
What did he finish? First, and third with that thing at GPs?
Yeah, he had an insane run. Something along those lines.
So Ben with a nice draw here. He drew a Pyrite Spell Bomb, which does give him a way to kind of turn those Ichor Wellsprings into Pyrite Spell Bombs, which would then allow him to further cycle through his deck. And given that he has that Mox Opal, he does have the ability to generate a lot of mana here. Do you think Ben just has the win here? Like, what's the
can he go
likelihood
off
that he
now?
fizzles here?
So
Yeah.
Ben actually may just have the win because he's able to generate a ton of mana and use Inventor's Fair and find the second Scrap Trawler or a Mirror Retriever in order to just let him see a ton of cards and a ton of mana. He drew a Chromatic Star too, and now that he has a 0, a 1, and a bunch of 2s, it's going to be really hard. Oh, he already had the Pirate's Bow anyway. It's going to be, though, Star's much better because you can sack it to draw a card and generate 2 mana because of how it's worded. It draws you a card when it's sacrificed. It doesn't, to either ability, it doesn't matter why.
And, of course, you can see that we've got die on those cards there so that we can have a visual representation of the mana that Ben Stark is working with at any given time. That's just an aid, well, not only for the players, but for us watching in the booth and at home, just so that we can see what's going on. Because when combo decks start going off, things can get a little weird with how much mana is floating and how many cards and turns and storm count and all that kind of stuff.
It's also an aid for the players, so
Indeed.
so they know that everything is good. I mean, Ben doesn't have to remember that he's got 8 mana, or in this case 5 mana floating. He can actually know that. And then now
At this point, the loop is literally sack Retriever to get back Trawler and anything, sack Trawler to get back Retriever and anything.
Yeah, and they have played each other already. Ben Stark has already demonstrated the loop to Ben Hall before, and I'm sure he's played against this matchup plenty, and Ben knows what he's doing, that he knows that he has this game locked up.
Oh, yeah, no, I would never expect you to concede just when I'm 95% or whatever, once I have.
there's nothing like watching Ben Stark.
No, and I'm glad we have a microphone.
Oh,
on
it's
him.
great.
So Ben Stark evens things up against Ben Hull, 1 game apiece down there. So we've got Josh Utter-Leyton up a game over Alan Wu, one game apiece on Modern, and Greg Orange with a very quick Game 1 victory over Martin Jůza on our back table, which is standard. Looks like we're going to be popping in there and see how Game 2 is shaping up between those two. Looks like they're poised and ready to begin. You see Martin kind of holding his cards off to the side. He's actually doing that for the benefit of our card spotter. That way we get the cards in hand graphics updated, and you at home get to know what's going on.
Greg Orange is quickly becoming one of those players who, when you sit down across from him, you can make a pretty good guess as to what he's playing. I don't think I've ever seen him play a deck that doesn't have lands that tap for white and blue mana. Between Esper and White Blue and Control for about 3 years now at various Pro Tours, with some very good finishes in between.
Yeah, he will kind of live and die by how good Control is in the format. No matter what, you will almost always see Greg Orange on a Control deck.
I actually had a quick chat with Greg right before they were going to start because I wanted to ask him if he remembered when we first met, and he said, oh, yeah. And we met on the airplane flying to Barcelona for Pro Tour Avicen Restored in 2012. That was my first time doing coverage at the Pro Tour, and it was his first Pro Tour appearance. He was flying out there with his dad. And here we are. He's got a Pro Tour top 8 on his resume, as well as a GP win. And now he's playing in the finals of another Pro Tour. So I'd say things went pretty well for Greg since then. He's certainly developed a bit of a name for himself as a control player, as you guys mentioned.
And this is going exactly according to plan in terms of what the control deck wants to be doing. He has curved out perfectly and been able to deal with Martin Jůza's threat every single turn. And Martin is also stuck on lands. And now he has a Teferi on the battlefield as well.
And it will soon be followed by a Torrential Gearhulk.
After watching Greg Orange play with Teferi for the last match, I was for the first semifinal, I was down in the feature match area for that. There's seal away as well.
Oh,
My
this is
goodness
brutal.
sakes, he's had an answer for everything. I want to see. I would love to go back in time and see his face the first time he read Teferi on some type of website or whatever when it was first previewed, because that is the most Greg Orange card I've ever seen.
And everything is just curving out perfectly for Greg Orange as well. He even drew Search for Escanta, which you can use the mana to play and then get to untap his lands with the Teferi. And now he still has access to that Torrential Gearhulk, which you can use to either cast a Hieroglyphic Illumination or the Forsake the Worldly in his graveyard.
Yeah, this is just a clinic as to why should you play Blue-Eyed? It's like, well...
You have draws like this.
Martin does have the Unlicensed Disintegration to pick off the Gearhulk, but again, that Forsake means that second Scrap Heap Scrounger is just getting out of there, and Teferi is just going to take 1 point of damage. It's just not going to be close to enough. And because you can no longer redirect the unlicensed disintegration damage, Teferi is going to stay at a healthy 4 loyalty.
Yeah, just unscathed. Does take that one hit from the Bomat Courier, but 4's a lot. This one looks like it has slipped away from Martin Jůza from the very beginning. He's now behind on lands, on cards. Technically, he's ahead on board, I suppose. He has a Bomat Courier, no creatures for for Greg. We'll give him that one. The problem, of course, is that Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is absolutely crushing this board right now. And boom, evens that up as well. Martin's not going to be able to cash in that Courier for any number of cards. Forsake the Worldly, really doing work here for Greg Orange, casting it, flashing it back, now casting another one. And there's a replacement Bomat Courier, and Greg has to decide if he even cares about it enough to bother with the disallow that he has in his hand.
Yeah. And this is the brutal part about team tournaments. Were I Martin Jůza playing an individual Pro Tour, I would be packing things up right now. But in a team tournament, you got to play out to the bitter end. And, you know, even though I think Martin is effectively 0% to win here, it is very funny that he does have to continue battling.
And it looks like Greg Orange finally has enough cards in his graveyard to the point where on the next turn, if he just chooses to put the top card of his library into his graveyard, he will be able to flip Search for Azcanta into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, and then he will be able to use the nice combination of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. He can use the ability on his turn to be able to look at the top 4 cards of his library, find a non-creature spell, and then use Teferi's triggered ability to untap Azcanta the Sunken Ruin to use it again.
Here you see Greg wanting the Bomat trigger to resolve, then cast Commit to put Bomat second from the top. He could have effectively had it be the top card, which actually I wonder would have been pretty appealing too. That prevents Martin from drawing a land.
Right. I mean, how does Martin even get out of this? I don't think he can. It seems to me that Greg Orange is just way too far ahead on cards here. He now has multiple ways to get ahead on cards. He's got the Teferi, he's got Azcanta, and he's got multiple counter spells and a cast out in his hand.
Oh, this game is beyond over.
Yeah.
Not for Greg Orange.
Oh no, he
still has cards to draw. Yeah,
it's extremely fun to be using Azcanta and untapping it with Teferi and putting syncopates into your hand.
Yeah, and then he can do it again. Yeah, it's getting a little ugly here.
Yeah, Martin, you know, there is some incentive here to continue playing out the game just to see exactly how, you know, Orange sideboards, because we are in Game 3. So getting a little more information, figuring out how exactly Orange is going to choose to win this game. You know, what are some of the spells that he'll reveal off Azcanta the Sunken Ruin? That information is valuable.
Yeah, that is definitely not nothing. We'll note, looking at you can see the match scores on the bottom of the screen. Josh being up 2-0 is really bad news for Alan Wu here because, as we saw in our last match when Josh played against Marcio Carvalho playing the same exact matchup, once he gets to sideboarding, putting in 3 copies of Dread of Night is a significant boon for the Blue-Black Death Shadow deck, and it's going to be really hard for Death and Taxes to kind of fight through that. You have to win 3 post-board games when your opponent has 3 copies of a 1-mana enchantment that blanks a significant portion of the cards in your deck.
So many cards. Look at this. This is just a control player's dream.
Paul cannot keep the jealousy out of his voice here.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing. We're one cryptic command away from Paul's dream Christmas land here.
So many cards. Oh.
It is ridiculous, though.
Right.
How many cards he gets to see. Sure, another Teferi.
Why not?
Also, we're nearing Teferi ultimate range.
Then that is one of Greg's primary win conditions. He technically doesn't need anything else to win the game.
No.
He can ultimate Teferi, exile all of Martin's permanents, and then start playing Teferi and using the -3 ability on Teferi himself to never deck.
If you notice, he didn't even use Azcanta the Sunken Ruin there because his hand is full of all good spells. So he's just like, well, if I do this, I'm just going to discard anyways. So he chose not to do it.
There it goes. And this is what happens. He always does this. He's going to immediately play another Teferi.
Yep.
There we go. I was going to say a little short on that, but now he's going to draw a card and take out the dual land there from Martin Jůza. And I think that even if I'm on Martin's team at this point, I might just give him the green light to go ahead and scoop it up for psychological reasons.
He's got Illumination, and he can cycle Cast Out to exile all the lands that Martin Jůza has on the battlefield. Okay, he's like, all right, I'm done.
We've seen enough. So, heading towards a flawless victory, Greg Orange snaps off every permanent in play outside of that one broken down vehicle and earns himself a 2-game-to-1 advantage.
And then 6 would just be a reroll.
Ooh, we're having some fun here.
Okay, my turn.
I heard Ben Stark say something about a reroll. So this is what, Burning Inquiry resolving? Is that what he's...
Yeah, that is. It looks like turn on Flameblade Adept, Ben planted Grove and passed, and then in response to Burning Inquiry, because he doesn't know what he's going to discard, Ben chose to Lightning Bolt the Flameblade, which one of the most threatening cards out of the Hollow One deck, because it's not like KCI is going to put too many blockers in the way, besides like the odd Scrap Trawler or Mirror Retriever, and Flameblade just hits for tons of damage.
Yeah, and it looks like Ben Stark has avoided the Leyline of the Void, at least for this game, that Ben Hull has likely sideboarded in here, given that it is game 3.
And then 1 to 7, and you get the 7-sider. 1, 2, 3, 4. 7.
The 7-sider has been called.
The classic 7-sider.
Magic as it was meant to be played. I got that range, so I can't do that for you.
With a 7-sided die.
Yeah. All right, and this is still on Ben Hull, and it looks like he found a Hollow One. So that's a turn 2 Hollow One off of Burning Inquiry.
Plus an Angler.
So 9 power on the battlefield on turn 2.
With Thoughtseize waiting in the wings, Ben's going to really have his work cut out for him this time. KCI does not do great against that much early pressure plus disruption.
Apparently this is how game 1 went as well.
Just look, you just removed all 6 this turn, right? Yep, never anything before. Yep. I don't have any counters in my deck.
Ben keeping it real in the feature match area, admitting to Ben Hull that he doesn't have any counters in his deck.
Yeah, Ben really needs something like a Mind Stone here, I want to say, just to be able to keep up with the speed that Ben Hull is representing here. He's got 9 damage on the board. That's That's a 3-turn clock. If Ben Hull is holding something like either Collective Brutality or a Lightning Bolt, or if he draws one off the top, that's a 2-turn clock plus lethal damage.
Well, Ben does have a Nature's Claim, so he's going to be able to take out the Hollow One, and then other Ben, Ben Hull, is going to Thoughtseize Ben Stark, but that, that's not the end of the world for Ben's chances. Taking out the Hollow One significantly cuts the clock, and then it looks like Ben Hull's last 2 cards are Tassiger and another Angler, which are pretty far away from becoming active.
Okay, so we got a fight here. Ben Stark did tell us before the match started that even though Ben Hull has a lot of hate cards for the matchup, he says he still can win. He has answers and ways to get through all of them. It's just they need to line up properly for him.
Yeah, and look at here. Ben Hull is, pretty good chance he takes the Karkline Ironworks because Ben Stark has already discarded 1.
2, you're at 19.
Gives Ben 3 turns to assemble some more lands and another Ironworks, but he's got double Ancient Stirrings in hand, a draw off the Terrarian. I would not count Ben Stark out yet.
Yeah, but he does need to string together lands. He did find a land. Scrap Trawler and Karkline Ironworks to get it all together before this Gurmag Angler presents lethal damage.
The good thing for Ben Stark, though, is that the Ichor Wellsprings represent extra looks, even if you haven't found the Trawler yet. You'd much rather sack the map with the Trawler. That's
how about
a lot
Ancient
more value.
Strains?
But
that's going to let him see a lot of cards. I know Simon, when I was in the booth with him earlier in the event, was saying that he thought Ancient Stirrings might be the most powerful card in Modern right now.
It's certainly up there. Ancient Stirrings, Faithless Looting. Those are probably some of the top contenders. Mox Opal.
Emrakul Aeon's Torn
has the most power.
Thank
you, Luis.
Yeah.
With 1 card in hand. 2.
So
Ben does not look happy with what he's with the 5 cards off of the Ancient Stirrings.
He might just have an itchy head.
He's also looking over at Raptor like, hey, maybe I need a hand here. He's got a very close judgment call, it looks like.
And that means that Ben hasn't either. I don't think he has seen. He did not see Karkline Ironworks or Scrap Trawler. So peeling that Buried Ruin means that he's gonna the plan to get back Karkline Ironworks. But that means next turn he'll take a hit down to 10, play the Ironworks. The turn after that he'll be able to replay the Ironworks, and that fetch land actually lets Ben play Tassiger this turn, but that doesn't actually clock Ben Stark. He goes to 1.
Right.
It doesn't change.
It is
the
not lethal next turn, but it does give Ben Hull multiple outs here. He can now draw Bloodghast or Flame Wake Phoenix or Collective Brutality or even Lightning Bolt. Those are all cards now that he can draw off the top for lethal damage.
And note that Ben Stark does not have a guaranteed combo. He will have a Clan Ironworks in play alongside an Ichor Wellspring, Terrarian, and maybe one other artifact if he draws a 1-drop. But that's not a position you frequently go off from with nothing else in your hand.
I mean, even if I kill by damage, it'll be from a commanding board state.
Though Ben does have another Ancient Stirrings in hand, so that's going to give him a pretty good amount of shots.
Can he Buried Ruin and Ancient Stirrings here?
He can. He's able to do both in the same turn.
Yeah, he really needs basically Ben Hull to whiff this turn to give him one more turn. It's very unlikely that Ben Stark can go off this turn. So, yeah, if
I
Ben
actually
Stark,
think it's impossible. Yeah.
okay, if Ben Stark can dodge,
well, he could,
Bloodghast or Flamewake Phoenix, he can get there.
He could actually draw off Terrarian first. So if Ben draws exactly what he needs off Terrarian, yeah, it would have to be Ironworks immediately.
Yeah.
No, it's another Terrarian.
Do you go for the Ancient Stirrings here now?
Well, you have to use Buried Ruin, so you're locked into using 3 mana essentially, your land drop plus 2 mana. And Ancient Stirrings is good because it gives you, if you find a Clan Ironworks off the Ancient Stirrings, you don't actually have to use the Buried Ruin.
Right.
Let's see if he hits one here. Looks like a pair of Spell Bombs, a Sphere. Don't see a Clan Ironworks.
Is that a Sai?
Looks like Ben boarded in Sai, the Master Artificer, and Sai would have been good here. Imagine Ben drew Sai this turn. He would crack Terrarian, play Sai, and then play like a Chromatic Star and get a Thopter, chump the Angler with the Thopter. Next turn, just make 4 Thopters.
Right. He does have 1 mana floating. He could theoretically. Oh no, he can't get the Sai, of course, off the Ancient Stirrings.
Yeah, that would take a that would be an ambitious pull. So Ben basically gets to get a cantrip, a little egg, as a lot of people call them, a star or a pirate spell bomb or something along those lines.
But it seems like, given that he missed on the Clan Ironworks, is this the time to play your Buried Ruin, use it, and get back your Clan Ironworks?
Almost certainly that's what Ben wants to do because that lets him know that he's definitely going to cast Ironworks next turn. And he has a lot of draws from there that can get him out of there, especially since he can pull Chromatic Star here. And again, stars are the most valuable of the 1-mana artifacts when you have an Ironworks because you can sack it to generate 2 mana and still get the card draw, whereas like Pirate Spellbomb or Chromatic Sphere cost you mana to sacrifice. Well, Sphere breaks even and Spellbomb costs you 1.
Keep in mind, we're talking about all the cards that Ben Stark needs to draw here to hope to try to win. Ben Hull has a bunch of draws to straight up win the game, and on top of that, he even has cards like Ancient Grudge and Thoughtseize that can also, kind of disrupt what Ben Stark's trying to do.
Yeah, he only needs to buy himself 1 turn one way or the other to win this one.
He also could draw Faithless Looting, Goblin Lore, Burning Inquiry to. Well, the Burning Inquiry and the Goblin Lore don't do it, but Flameblade Adept's a miss. We're gonna get the lottery turn here.
All right, so down to one for
turn.
Ben Stark. He could not be more far behind. He's got to find combo pieces, and he needs to go off if he's going to win this 3rd game between Ben Hull and himself. Let's see what he gets for his turn.
He's got a lot of cantrip effects. That looks like a handful of stars, and he can sack the Ichor Wellspring to get this started to get the 2 mana in play.
Yeah, Ben's going to get a lot of looks.
Right. And every time Ben plays a Chromatic Star or a Terrarian, he does net 1 mana whenever he sacks them to the Clan Ironworks, and he still gets to draw a card due to the templating on those cards.
And he's looking for Scrap Trawler. That's the number 1
Lightning Bolt
card.
Star. Sack it, get 2 extra mana.
Trawler?
Nose, Inventor's Fair.
And that doesn't do a whole lot because Ben's already played his land for the turn.
Terrarion.
Draw a card, get 2 mana.
There's the Scrap
That
Trawler.
was
Trawler.
Scrap Trawler. Now, what does that mean?
Well, Ben hasn't hit a Mox yet, so his 1-drop artifacts don't generate mana. But it does mean that if he does sack Star or Sphere and hit another Ichor Wellspring, that'll let him chain. Or if he draws a Mox, he can start chaining mana. So
what's the thing he wants to see the absolute most at this point?
I think given what he has out now, a Mere Retriever or Ichor Wellspring, I think,
Okay.
are both pretty good draws.
Those are both cards that get him the most cards and keep
It's
the,
possible
keep
that
it
actually
flowing.
seeing a Psy from here could generate enough blockers, but that does mean that's not an automatic.
He really wants a 0 mana artifact,
Yeah.
but he missed.
Yeah, he hit a land. And as Luis said, he's already played his land for the turn.
So is he now just playing Chromatic Sphere and just cycling it?
That will let him get one more draw step.
Oof, he's right down to it.
Before or after I draw the card from it? I choose the color before I draw the card?
Ben,
Still picking up the subtle intricacies of this list.
well, it's rough because blue lets him draw Psy, in which case he can make a couple. He can play the Scrap Trawler, make an artifact, sack Scrap Trawler, get back Wellspring, make another to make 2 Thopters. Green lets him draw Ancient Stirrings, of which he's got a couple left in his deck as well.
Right.
Also,
Yeah, okay.
if Ben draws Nature's Claim, I think he might be able to Nature's Claim one of his own artifacts and then bolt Flamewick Adept if he can get enough different colors of mana.
Ah, okay.
Here we go. New card.
Well,
Is that an Ancient Stirrings?
It is.
He hit the Stirrings.
Oh!
He finds an Ancient Stirrings. He had the green mana ready.
Okay, now we get 5 looks.
There's a sigh.
Oh, is he gonna miss?
Oh, no.
Last card.
Really bad.
It wasn't what he wanted to see, but I
No.
think he was glad to hit anything at that point.
Well, I don't know if the Pyrite Spellbomb's going to get it done here.
That shape now.
Yeah, he said it.
Use this for mana though, right?
Is he using the Pyrite Spellbomb as a mini ritual here?
Yeah, unfortunately for Ben, he's going to be able to play Pirate's Poem, go up to 4 colorless mana, and then play Scrap Trawler, sack it, get back Ichor Wellspring. But he gets to see some more cards, but he has to throw his Scrap Trawler in the process.
Did you hear what he just said? He said, this is so bad.
Yeah, he really needed to find explosives or some of the other 0 mana artifacts in his deck to be able to generate all the mana to do all the things that he wanted to do. But
Let's listen into Ben for a minute here as he walks his way through.
I did the last game. It's his turn. Sure.
There's the Wellspring. He hit a star.
so he's had to sack Scrap Trawler here.
Then that has to happen.
And he found a Buried Ruin. That's not going to do anything for him.
Ben needs to chain like a really unlikely sequence of events here that involves multiple Wellsprings.
Like, he sacks this into a Scrap Trawler?
No, he needs to draw Wellspring off of this, and then
Okay,
off of
yeah,
the
yeah.
Wellspring, draw like a Scrap Trawler and a Mox.
And another Wellspring or, Mox. So now he's at 3. This needs to be a big draw here.
Wellspring? No,
Nope.
it's just another land.
Maybe I'll win. I have 3 mana left. 2-1. Oh, I don't have any other options.
So now he can cycle this into a star, which he then needs to sack into a Wellspring and get that going.
All right, he didn't hit, and he's going to scoop it up. He says, good game. And that is game number 3 going to Ben Hull with Hollow One. A great draw from him. On turn 2, he just casually dropped 9 power on the battlefield, and that was enough pressure to force Ben to go off in a situation that he wasn't quite prepared to. He did get to see a lot of cards through that stretch, but didn't see the ones that he needed. And now he's down 2-1 on our middle table. All right, we're going to revisit our legacy table now. Alan Wu with Death and Taxes is playing against Josh Utter-Leyton on Blue-Black Shadow. To give you an idea of what's going on in the big picture, look at the bottom part of your screen, and you'll see that both Ben Hull and Greg Orange are up 2-1 on their opponents, Ben Stark and Martin Jůza, though here, Josh Utter-Leyton is in very good shape, up 2-0 over Alan Wu.
And Josh Utter-Leyton has had to do a lot of heavy lifting this entire weekend. I believe he has, how many? 2 losses total? Yeah, in the entire...
He went
all his
11-2
rounds.
and then didn't finish one of his rounds.
Right.
No wonder you guys like this deck so much.
Oh, yeah.
You played the exact same deck in the tournament, Luis?
I did.
Swords to Plowshares is the card that Josh is going to take with that Thoughtseize, but Ether Vial is now ticking upwards. We are in our first sideboarded game, and there is that Wasteland that we saw.
Yeah, and Josh Utter-Leyton has to be thrilled that he picked up those first 2 games because the matchup gets much better for him after sideboard because he has the heavy hitters and the 3 copies of Dread of Night and 2 copies of Liliana the Last Hope. Now, Luis, 3 copies of Dread of Night, that almost feels a little excessive. Did you think that the Death and Taxes matchup was that bad?
So it's a combination of things. One is that we do think it's a bad matchup. Death and Taxes is really well constructed to punish the Death Shadow deck with Wastelands and aggressive creatures, and then Swords to Plowshares to really makes Death Shadow tricky, plus Mirren Crusader, a Recruit of the Guard, Mother of Runes, a lot of difficult cards. The second is that the win percentage a single copy of Dread of Night gives you if you resolve it is so big. It's actually, I think, the best sideboard card in Legacy across almost every metric, except for maybe Surgical Extraction against Reanimator. It's basically the most high-impact card you can get, and as a result, we decided just, like, we don't think we need the third one. We were going to play 2 no matter what, but we're like, we're just getting so much mileage out of it when we do play against Death and Taxes that even though this is super narrow, we're playing against one matchup in the whole field, we'll be really happy if we have this and we play against Death and Taxes. And it turns out Josh played Death and Taxes twice in the top 4 here.
Good choice.
Just new.
So Josh is continuing to set up for the oncoming turns with cards like Ponder, Cycling Street Wraith, playing lands.
Meanwhile, Alan has a Phyrexian Revoker he can violin, which likely will name Liliana the Last Hope.
Ooh.
But the rest of his hand is all lands. He does have that Horizon Canopy, but he's not really presenting much of an offense here.
We were just talking about Dread of Night, guys, and I see right on the top of the hand there for Josh Utter-Leyton, he's got one already.
Yeah, Josh is pretty well set up this game. He's got a pretty big advantage with the copy of Dread of Night, the Fatal Push for the Revoker, Brainstorm to filter.
And he does, in fact, name Liliana.
Take a look at that hand. He's basically got it all. I mean, he just really needs to find a threat at this point because he has pretty much, he has a ton of answers for whatever threats Alan Wu might deploy here.
Josh is pretty incentivized here to take care of that Revoker. It's one of the only creatures that can actually stay on the battlefield through Dread of Night, and he has Liliana the Last Hope in his hand on top of it.
However, Alan actually drew one of the more relevant cards in the matchup. He drew Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, a reason to not sacrifice his Horizon Canopy, which you notice he didn't do. Gideon, his emblem can cancel out a Dread of Night, and Gideon himself is a pretty big threat. So Josh is going to need to find a Daze or a Thoughtseize this turn, or Gideon's going to hit the board. Granted, one Gideon doesn't end the game, but it is a potent threat, especially in a position where a lot of your cards aren't as effective as they would be normally.
Now, do you sandbag the Dread of Night and wait for Alan Wu to play some 1 toughness white creatures, or do you just run it out there?
You don't really get punished for waiting on it very often. Like, Thalia can make it cost more, but for the most part, waiting on it doesn't hurt too badly. Looks like Josh is just going to run out the Liliana, so Gideon is going to hit the board.
And I guess Gideon Emblem is a way to at least counteract one of the Dread of Nights, if he does choose to go that route. So you're going to try to hit a thread here? Just go for the minus. But that's a little risky if Alan Wu did draw a 2-mana creature, right?
Yeah, anything Alan could violate, like a Thalia, for example, would kill Liliana if you chose to -2.
Yeah.
So he's going to take the alternate route, just plus, but he can breathe a little bit of relief there. The Aether Vial just stays inactive for this turn.
Is it Gideon time?
It is.
Not playing around Daze this time.
Not at all. And you know what? Josh doesn't have one. And he's tapped out, so he just has to say sure, but he can't be happy about that. Gideon Ally of Zendikar is a constant source of creatures as well as a quick clock in and of himself.
And
Though the combination of Dread of Night plus Liliana will keep these Knights off the battlefield if Josh wants.
Yeah, but how is he going to deal with just Gideon plus attack Liliana for 4? On top of that, Alan Wu drew a Stoneforge Mystic this turn to fetch out, a potential Batterskull that he can just cast if he draws a land.
And the Stoneforge Mystic's also likely going to survive this turn, so he'd be able to put it into play.
get that activation going before Liliana can take care of the Stoneforge.
So what is Josh looking for here?
He drew 2 dazes off of Brainstorm, which
Oh, no.
he can't be pleased about that timing. But Josh is going to be able to play a Gurmag Angler this turn, as well as likely that Dread of Night, which will to keep Allon's creatures at bay a little bit.
Josh finishes resolving Brainstorm. Now he's going to play Verdant Catacombs and get rid of those 2 cards.
Yeah, there's a decent chance Josh's turn shakes out to playing Angler, plussing Liliana on the Night token, then playing Dread of Night, which will kill the Night token, then wastelanding the Horizon Canopy there.
And that would leave him with Liliana at just 1 loyalty if Gideon decides to rumble.
Well, Allon is going to put in a Stoneforge Mystic end of turn, and then that Stoneforge Mystic could fetch like a Sword of Fire and Ice in order to force Gideon past Gurmag Angler, because the Angler will otherwise stop the attack here.
Yeah.
Right.
What is Allon holding in hand outside of the Stoneforge? So he has a land.
He has the land. He has Crocus.
So he has the ability to violin Stoneforge Mystic, get that Sword of Fire and Ice, use the Stoneforge Mystic's ability to put the sword into play, then activate Gideon, then activate the sword and equip onto the Gideon for a huge chunk of damage.
The problem with that line, though, is that lets Gurmag Angler just kill Gideon.
Right.
And Josh loses Liliana, but he doesn't end up in a spot where he's unhappy. If he can kill Gideon with Angler, he'll trade a Liliana. He even has a backup Liliana in hand. And he gets to play the backup Liliana and then plus it on the Stoneforge Mystic, which will then, thanks to the Dread of Night, finish off the Mystic. So despite Gideon giving Allon a pretty good chance here, I mean, Dread of Night is just a really hard card to get around.
Of course, Dread of Night is going to have that static ability on a lot of the top decks that Allon Wu comes up with later on, as many of his creatures are both white and 1 toughness and won't even survive it.
Is there a consideration to maybe get Umezawa's Jite then? Because then he can just cast a Jite and keep the Stoneforge Mystic back to block and use the Gideon to attack Liliana the Last Hope. And it's not like Josh Utter-Leyton can block with the Gurmag Angler. Well, if he does, he will lose the Angler.
Well, if Gideon attacks Liliana, it won't kill Liliana because of Dread of Night.
Oh, right.
It'll hit Liliana to 1, and then Liliana finishes off Stoneforge, and then Gideon dies.
Well, but then you'll have 2 counters on Umezawa's Jite, which you can use to shrink down the Gurmag Angler, which would mean that the Gideon would survive, right?
The Gideon would survive, so you Jite there.
You'd have a 4-power Gideon getting blocked, but he doesn't take damage, and then you could use one of the counters to finish off.
All right, just get the big one.
And Batterskull's good because it protects Gideon. And you especially with the loop of like return Batterskull, replay Batterskull, you do have some amount of protection from that Gurmag Angler.
When in doubt, get the Batterskull.
And we don't know the exact configuration that Allon has in his deck post-board here, but whether he ticks up his Vial has to be consideration as well.
And it looks like he favors the 2, although going to 3 would have been better in this spot, as he did just draw Mirren Crusader.
Well, that's going to be problematic for Josh as well. Protection from black, that also blocks the Gurmag Angler, though we might end up in a spot where if Allon decides to cast Mirren Crusader, he gets to play as Caracas, so he's safe from days. But Josh may have kept double days. I don't know.
He did.
He may have kept the double days in hand.
He does have 2 days in hand.
Right, so maybe it's better for Allon to just keep the Mirren Crusader in hand, tick up the Vial to 3. Oh, we have a Gideon emblem here. It's a 4-mana way to counteract that Dread of Night that's on the battlefield.
Okay. Allon Wu thinking long-term.
On top of that, because of the Gideon emblem, Allon Wu can use the Stoneforge Mystic to put Batterskull into play, which will be a 5/5 lifelinker, which will be bigger than that Gurmag Angler on the battle, which will be the same size as that Gurmag Angler on the battlefield.
Yeah, but a happy trade for Wu, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whew, this is a good close game.
Yeah, that second Dread of Night from Josh kind of re-shrinks Allon's creatures, except not the Batterskull.
Right.
It's funny, so when we built the deck, we had a split of 3 Ponders, 1 Preordain. And it's for situations like this that we wanted the Preordain, where Josh sees 1 card he wants, 2 he doesn't, including 2 fetch lands. And most Legacy decks just don't mind playing their 3rd or 4th land, so finding a fetch land to shuffle away the other cards isn't too big of a deal. This deck really wants to stay on 2 or 3 lands post-board, so here you'd rather be able to just Preordain and keep the 1 card you want, ship the rest.
I like that you had to explain that because I feel like one member of your team posted this deck list and it had the 3 Ponder preordain, and I was like, I know exactly what the rest of the world's going to ask you. And then shortly after, there was a response saying, this is the reason why I'm playing 3 Ponder, 1 preordain. Let's not go nuts.
Yes, those were all my tweets. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I agree because as soon as I posted it, it's like, is Throne of Geth a typo, and why 3 Ponder, 1 preordain?
Yeah, Martin just actually didn't even know that card was in Raptor's sideboard until like at some point very late in the tournament.
Josh can use Liliana as a card draw mechanism here. He can use her -2, though he knows he won't get anything but a Street Wraith back, but he will filter 2 lands off the top of his deck that he doesn't want.
Yeah, it does work very well with Ponder.
Street Wraith's going to get cycled back immediately from graveyard to hand to graveyard. Is that a third daze?
All these dazes mocking Josh
dazes.
after that Gideon resolved.
Does he also have another Dread of Night? All right, so they're one-upping each other.
So Stoneforge Mystic will still live as a Gideon emblem is on the battlefield. So it's currently a 0-1. And we are now staring at a 5-5 Batterskull. So now Allen can use that Batterskull to pressure the Liliana, the last hope. Then Josh Utter-Leyton does have to make a decision here as to whether or not he wants to just let the Liliana go or block with Gurmag Angler.
Attack Liliana, trade off with the Batterskull. But long-term wise, this isn't good for Josh, right?
So what Josh needs to happen here is he can minus the Liliana on the Stoneforge, and then Allen can replay it, bounce the Batterskull, replay it with Stoneforge, and Josh really can't do a whole lot about that. He really hoped that Allen just didn't have a 5th land there, because if not, then he could potentially strand the Batterskull in Allen's hand.
Yeah, this is a really tough situation. Allen now has the ability to bounce Batterskull, replay with Stoneforge Mystic, and he has that Mirren Crusader in his hand with the Vial on 3. And although it is a 2-2 with 2 Dread of Knights in play, again, Gideon Emblem, but Dread of Knight number 3. You guys were going to only play 2, but now there's number 3 on the battlefield, which does basically ruin Allen Wu's strategy of putting that Mirren Crusader onto the battlefield.
It takes away both of the things that you just mentioned, doesn't it? Now assuming that this resolves, the Stoneforge Mystic is going to die, and if you were to put in the Mirren Crusader, it dies too.
Allen, sequencing very cleverly here. This is the classic. What you want to do is not return Batterskull, then put it into play. Activate Stoneforge and in response return Batterskull. If he does it the other order, Josh can kill Stoneforge in response. But this does let Josh get back Gurmag Angler, and he can then once again trade, and then when the Batterskull comes down, he gets to daze it.
3 Dread of Night for Josh Utter-Leyton. This is why you guys put him in the sideboard, and he's drawn all of them, even taking over a Gideon emblem and making life extraordinarily difficult now for Allen Wu.
It's amazing that he actually needed the 3rd Dread of Night here.
And Josh has 3 dazes in hand, so if Allen trades off Batterskull here, which Josh will certainly block, then Allen's going to bounce and try to replay Batterskull, and he's going to get his Batterskull dazed a bunch of times. I think that Batterskull is the last way Allen can deal damage except for Phyrexian Revokers.
Right.
So now Josh is really leaning on Liliana here to kind of power him through to the rest of the game.
Yeah,
because his hand is, I mean, he's got 3 dazes.
But he has a Planeswalker in play. Also,
yeah,
Allen has 3, a ton of white creatures in his deck, and Josh has 3 Dread of Knights in play. Allen's future prospects are somewhat dampened by the fact that most of the cards he can draw just don't have any effect.
Allen actually does have a few answers here, however. He has 2 copies of Council's Judgment in his sideboard that he likely brought in. On top of that, he has a 2nd copy of Gideon Ally of Zendikar.
Look at this. He's going to demand all 3 dazes.
Triple days?
Josh has dazes for days here.
He does. Daze.
The hard cast. Allen knows what's coming. Allen knows what's coming. He's like, oh my goodness, do you really have 3 dazes?
Unbelievable. 3 Dread of Night, 3 days. And that Batterskull is in the graveyard. And look at Allen. Even Josh is laughing at this situation.
That's why they call him Raptor.
Boy.
Oh, my.
He finds a Ponder. That's exactly the type of card he wants to see at this point, because now he's in the market for finding a threat.
And he's found that threat in Delvar of Secrets here.
Yeah, I like keeping the Delvar, and then you can flip Revealing Thoughtseize, but then shuffle away the Thoughtseize with your Misty Rainforest.
Yep. So now, Alan Wu, I mean, he is at 29. He has some time here. He does need to find an answer to those Dread of Knights that are on the battlefield.
So Alan can use Recruit of the Guard to find Phyrexian Revoker here. So this gives him a decent chance.
It goes immediately to the graveyard, of course, but Revoker, colorless, doesn't care about Dread of Night. Not scared at all.
Is he getting
He could get
Palace Jailer? He could use that as a way to draw cards. If he casts a Palace Jailer, he will be able to remove the Delvar of Secrets, so Josh Utter-Leyton won't have a threat. Alan Wu will be the Monarch, and he will be able to draw a card once per turn until Josh Utter-Leyton finds a way to deal combat damage to Alan Wu.
Right. With only one threat on the battlefield, it might take Josh a little while to do so.
That seems to be the best option here, right?
It's pretty close. Josh is not very close to being able to cast these Street Wraiths with Liliana. So at that point, you're kind of... The problem with getting the Palace Jailer is if you don't hit Council's Judgment, you're in a decent amount of trouble because Josh is eventually going to get to a Liliana Ultimate here. Even though Alan's drawing extra cards, a lot of the cards in his deck don't do anything.
Right.
Also, Josh does have a Gurmag Angler in his graveyard, which you can get back with the Liliana next turn.
Yeah.
Alan was looking at that as well.
This feels a little riskier because the Revoker would be a 3-2 and likely just trade with the Delvar. But that doesn't give Alan much headway. This, I think, is the higher risk play, but the higher reward play.
Right.
Does feel like he needs to take some pretty high risks here, given the board state that he's under.
Now he wants to find some removal spells. He also has a couple of Wastelands in play.
And I think Josh is going to fetch a tapped Watery Grave here.
Draw a card. Does he want to use the Wastelands here?
I believe so.
Doesn't really have to play around Days very much anymore as he's
They're all
three
gone.
of them.
Okay, so Wasteland, leaving Utter-Leyton with just the one land left.
But
that's all he really needs to cast any of his threats.
yeah, he does have that Gurmag Angler in the graveyard, which I imagine...
Ooh, Death Shadow off the top of the library. Does he have another land? He does. So can he just do both here?
Yeah, I think that he's heavily incentivized to do both.
So now Alan Wu needs to draw multiple removal spells here to get both of these creatures off the battlefield so that he can maintain control of the crown, if you will.
Yeah, and he can't. I mean, in his hand right now is Mirren Crusader and Sword of Fire and Ice. So he needs to rip basically Swords to Plowshares into Swords to Plowshares, something along those lines, and he hasn't done it.
Well, he's got a blocker here in the Revoker, and then I suppose he can draw either Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile to deal with one of the creatures on the battlefield, to deal with the other creature in the battlefild with this card draw. He could also hit like a Flicker Wisp and Violet in to flicker one of the creatures so that he can maintain control and be the stay of the Monarch. But
Revoker was a good draw. Revoker also gets to name Liliana, and with Josh at 5, Revoker's pretty close to presenting lethal as well. So Alan plays out the Sword of Fire and Ice. That actually could change Josh's play too, because now he knows the Revoker is a lethal attacker.
Oh, right.
But he drew Path, but he's out of mana,
but he doesn't
isn't
have
he?
the lands.
Yeah, he's tapped out now.
Oh man, he actually hit.
Josh drew Snuff Out. He can go to 1 here.
Is Josh at 5? I thought he was at 5 before the land.
I did too. When he played Watery Grave, I
Yeah.
felt like he was at 3 at that point, or should go to 3. But
We'll double check that.
we will double check.
Yeah.
Oh, so he cannot play the Snuff Out.
Did not think he was at 5, so that changes things dramatically, especially with just the 2 lands for Utter-Leyton. That Snuff Out is a long way off.
And
actually, Alan
Wu just has the win, right?
Yeah.
He has Path to Exile in his hand. All he needs to do, if Josh Utter-Leyton attacks with one of his creatures, the game will end.
Oh my God, what a swing!
Josh gets the Monarch back, and if he draws a Fatal Push at the end of the turn, he'll be able to kill the Phyrexian Revoker.
Oh my goodness sakes, is that what it's going to come down to? Boy, this Monarch makes the advantage bar swing back and forth wildly.
And the funny thing is, Alan drew past exile, not Swords to Plowshares. Had he drawn Swords to Plowshares, Josh would get an extra turn.
The problem is Josh Utter-Leyton has to be proactive. Alan Wu is currently the Monarch, so he's drawing an extra card every turn. So I feel like he has to attack here.
All right, take the Monarch back, and he's going to have to hit Fatal Push.
Delvar is a blue creature, so he cannot get in the way if Alan Wu uses Path to Exile on the Death Shadow.
He found Brainstorm, which is the maximum sweat.
He can Brainstorm and maybe find Force of Will in a blue card?
That was Mother of Runes. That's not going to do it. So
There's
here
a
we go.
path.
Path to Exile on your Death Shadow.
Time to Brainstorm.
This is it. Brainstorm looking for an answer.
More Snuff Out.
Oh, he
Snuff
found
Out.
another copy of Snuff Out, which you'd think would be exactly what he wants. But it's just not here.
He was really hoping that that was a Swords to Plowshares so that Josh Utter-Leyton would have the life to use Snuff Out. But it was one of his 2 Path to Exiles in his sideboard instead.
Yeah,
Look at Josh. Look at the board. He's like, you got me.
Wow.
And that is Alan Wu taking down game number 3 in a violent swing back in his direction in the last turn of the game.
He beat Triple Dread of Night.
Oh, my
Wow.
goodness.
After getting his Batterskull triple days, that was quite the game.
Yeah.
Boy, these finals are delivering the goods for us, and it is close across the board. Josh is up 2-1. Ben Hull up 2-1 over Ben Stark. And now on our back table, it's Gregory Orange who's up 2-1 over Martin Jůza in Standard. And we're going to get to see if Greg Orange can seal the deal here and finish off the Hall of Famer, or if Martin Jůza is going to give him trouble and fight back to even things up.
So similar draw from Martin Jůza, except this time he is on the play. And it looks like Greg Orange was the person mulliganing this game.
By the way, Palace Jailer, wow.
It has done some serious work.
Seriously.
No Meltdown this time around. Looking for some answers.
Cycle, finding lands, pass the turn back. Let's see what Martin has as far as threats goes. He has 4 mana, and he's just going to say, boom, I'm going to run Hazoret out there. Kind of force you to react.
Yeah, I
It's
think
going to be disallowed.
disallow makes a lot of sense.
Go.
Oh, that was a nice card for Greg Orange. It looks like he just drew Glimmer of Genius.
He also has Cast Out and, in his hand, Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations where you can't really play around anything. If you play around counter magic, you know, Greg Orange can just cast Glimmer of Genius, untap. He's also got a Gear Hulk in his hand too, which you can use to, you know, recast either Glimmer or counter magic if he so chooses. A lot of options here for Greg Orange.
Yeah, and this is the game plan that Blue White really wants to enact, and it's greatly helped by the fact that Jůza didn't play a threat on turn 3. If he had been able to play a threat on turn 3 and that heart was getting crewed, we would have a very different game because all of a sudden Greg would be under a decent amount of pressure.
Yeah, I think Greg's line here is to take the 4 damage and probably use Cast Out here on the Rekindling Phoenix. He could also consider using Glimmer of Genius and set up a big Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, I think he might be favoring Glimmer here. We'll find out in a second. He's got 3 4-mana spells, and they all have some different levels of appeal.
Now, given that, do you think Martin Jůza is likely to play around a card like Settle the Wreckage and only attack
Well,
with one of
if
the
you ask
threats?
me, is Martin Jůza likely to play around a card? The answer is generally going to be yes. And I think that there's a pretty good chance that if Martin doesn't draw a duress on his turn, we're not going to see both those creatures attacking into a settle, which, you know, still kind of plays into the blue-white deck's hands because that deck still gets to just play a 1-for-1 and not take any damage. But it is something that I think Martin is very good at.
You can go, he says. Back to Martin Jůza.
Are you going to play something and crew both your things and attack? Sigh.
How do you feel about basic lands, my friend? Martin considering his options here.
A lot of different considerations here.
And Martin can't be too happy. Like, this is where you want duress. Being able to strip out, settle the wreckage before attacking, even get to see it before attacking is very important. Martin might send both his creatures in now.
Martin has 3 copies of Duress in his sideboard. I'm sure they're in the deck somewhere at this point, but
Most
not in his
certainly.
hand.
He might also be incentivized to play the Beaumat Courier this turn.
What he
Because
could
has a
do is he
Hazard
could
in
play
hand?
Beaumont and send in Beaumont Courier and Heart, but not the Rekindling Phoenix.
Right.
And he's playing his other spells pre-combat to try to bait out counter spells, because if Greg counters a spell, of course, that way you don't have to fear settle this turn.
Beaumat Courier on the stack. Greg really doesn't have the option here, though.
I think we're going to see the play that you mentioned here, Luis, an attack for 5 here with the Courier and... Oh, wait.
This would be a devastating blow, yeah, if Jůza decides to attack with the Phoenix and get it exiled. So he's not going to do so. 5 damage is plenty, he says. Attack you. There's a trigger on the stack for the Beaumat Courier as well. Now, does this highly encourage Greg Orange to use the settle, or is he going to want to stay patient? Look at him.
He'll be fine without settling. He could just cast out the Heart of Kiran here.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. Trigger resolves, take a damage. You're down to 15. Go.
Yeah, you'd rather not give Martin just 2 additional mana this turn, and he's not really taking a whole lot of damage there anyways.
Yeah, just 1. So land go with 6 mana up, though. Now we're in Torrential Gearhulk territory. It's something that Martin Jůza is going to be considering as he lines up this turn where he has Glorybringer, Hazaret, and he can choose to cast either one this turn as well. Wow.
And that still runs kind of squarely into the same problem as last time, where you played it on settle last turn. Are you really going to like send in all your creatures and die to settle this turn? And if you send in too few, this is how the blue-white deck kind of gets you. If you send in too few creatures to play around settle, Torrential Gearhulk flashing back Illumination is a pretty good answer to that too.
So now there's a Glorybringer. How many creatures does he want to attack with? I don't know if he wants to attack with the Beaumat Courier here, because that would run into a Torrential Gearhulk potentially, if Greg Orange has that. So maybe he just chooses to attack with 2 flyers, something like Glorybringer and the Thopter maybe.
Looks like he's considering Pia as well.
Yep.
Okay, he's
Attacks
going
with
to
2
attack.
evasive creatures.
Yeah.
This allows him to try his best to play around both Settle the Wreckage and a Torrential Gearhulk.
Now it's going to be Settle the Wreckage, though, for Greg Orange, taking out the 2 creatures and getting a couple of lands onto the battlefield here for Jůza. He has maintained a pretty decent board state, though. 7 power on the board still for Martin. And he's going to pass the turn back to Greg.
Yeah. You know, Martin's in a difficult spot, but he's done a really good job of just kind of, you know, rationing out his attack so he doesn't get completely blown out by a Settle the Wreckage. And another Settle the Wreckage for Greg Orange.
The funny part about that as well is that Greg had the Gearhulk, so he kind of had access to 2 settles already, but the second settle just, well, it really does give him a lot of flexibility when it comes to how he wants to deal with Martin's attackers. You wait too long, though, and then Greg gets to enough mana where and actually he could have done it this turn, so he probably doesn't have it, from Martin's point of view, of Teferi plus untap 2 lands have settle up, and that's the classic turn 7 play.
Yeah, and at some point, it's kind of a numbers game. It's like, well, your opponent has already cast a Settle the Wreckage. You know, how many more copies of Settle can you afford to play around without putting yourself too far behind? Now, Greg Orange has also been representing Torrential Gearhulk here, so maybe he still just wants to play it a little cautiously. I feel like this is the turn where the Rekindling Phoenix is likely to get in.
Yeah, and I like this attack a lot because Martin has a Scrap Heap Scrounger in hand, so he's actually fine cashing in the Beaumont Courier here. And if Torrential Gearhulk hits, it's not the end of the world. He also doesn't expose Hazaret, which is a pretty good way of pressuring Greg. Though Greg does have another cast out in hand.
Now, is this a Gearhulk or a Settle the Wreckage?
It's a Gearhulk. He's responding to the Bomat Courier trigger, he says. And he's going to cast Settle the Wreckage. So Bomat's only going to get one card.
And what is this mystery card?
Another
And then this happens. And then
scrap heap, I think. Now he exiles a random card. Oh, sorry, that's going to happen after this as well.
Yeah, and Greg still has that cast out and Settle the Wreckage
Boy,
in hand.
Things looking very good for Greg Orange to seal the deal in his match, knocking out Martin Jůza and giving Team Hot Sauce Games a 1-0 lead, meaning that a match win from either Ben Hull or Alan Wu would seal it and make them Pro Tour champions.
Not only that, he is one permanent away from having the city's blessing, and he does have that Arch of Araska in play, meaning that, you know, sometimes, you know, when you play a control deck, you're like, you have all the answers, but you don't actually draw card draw spells. And then your opponent, who has, you know, generally less lands, draws out of it. But with that Arch of Araska in play, that does give him a little more inevitability here as well.
Yeah, and Martin's really on the razor's edge here. He doesn't have a whole lot he can do to get out of it, and he's getting pressured by Greg's card draw plus Greg's answers.
Martin does have access to a ton of mana now, and Pia Nalar does have a very relevant ability here. You can use Pia Nalar, spend 2 mana to give an artifact creature +1/+0 until end of turn, meaning that Martin can attack with that Scrap Heap Scrounger, and if Greg Orange wants to block with the Torrential Gearhulk, Martin can force a trade.
Yeah, the Arch being very relevant here. Without that Arch, I actually think Martin would have, you know, a decent shot of like hoping Greg doesn't draw Teferi or more, you know, card draw mechanisms. But with that Arch, yeah, Greg can like block your Scrap Heap Scrounger, seal away, and just use the Arch here.
So Scrounger has resolved, and I think Martin is probably just going to be attacking here with Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, he's got Pia Nalar there that he can use to pump up the Scrounger.
Yeah, he can pump it up 3 times here, which would give it just enough power to trade with Gearhulk if Greg Orange chose to block.
Yeah,
Also-
Greg can just block and sort of force Martin to do that and then play Seal Away if you'd like.
Also, because Martin played Scrounger first, he doesn't have enough mana to pump the Scrounger 3 times and still have a mana left over to sacrifice it to Pia Nalar's other ability to put it in the graveyard instead of it getting sealed away where it would be able to come back.
So Greg should actually block the Scrap Heap Scrounger and force Martin Jůza to spend all of his mana to pump it, and then use the Seal Away here to get it off the battlefield. And now, because he has the Blessing, he's also drawing a card off this Arch of Araska.
That is some very efficient use of mana there for Greg Orange as he starts to extend his lead over Martin Jůza. You gotta like his position at this point. Drawing an extra card a turn, assuming that he has the mana to do so. He's got a couple of counters in hand in the form of, oh, it's actually just one in Essence Scatter. He's also got, though, a Cast Out and that other Settle the Wreckage we mentioned. Plus, Torrential Gearhulk acting as a stop sign on the battlefield. He really just needs to find himself a Teferi, and I think he'd seal the deal here.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for Martin to come back or claw back from this situation, as Greg Orange is just drawing 2 cards a turn here. Search for Azcanta is a good draw. Teferi's a good draw. And I think you're going to see Martin do something very similar to what he did on the previous turn with an attack with the Scrounger. But this time he has access to 7 mana. So he can prevent the Scrap Heap Scrounger from getting sealed away.
And Greg kind of faced with a similar choice, though. He doesn't have the easy answer in Seal Away because he won't be able to use Arch if he uses Cast Out or Settle the Wreckage if he was so inclined.
One of the benefits of blocking with the Gearhulk here is that Martin Jůza does have to tap 6 mana, meaning he won't have the mana to actually put Scrap Heap Scrounger back into play this turn. So if he does accept the trade here, he can use the Arch of Araska to draw a card.
I do like that
That is
Gearhulk
tempting.
is keeping back those ground attackers, though. Though with Settle in hand, maybe Greg just doesn't care.
Right.
Let's draw a card, sure.
Well, get a little more information. Could draw Seal Away, of course, and just cast it. Could end up figuring out, what he wants to do next.
Boy, another Gear Hulk. I mean, the thing with what Greg is doing is he's being so mana efficient. He cycled a card after that block, and he's just using up all of his mana every turn to keep plowing through that library. And now it's a second Gear Hulk. That's going to buy him 2 or 3 turns. Eventually, he's going to find that Teferi and take over this game. Though a duress finally for Martin Jůza.
This is one of those situations, at least in playtesting, where you duress. Your opponent shows them your hand, and you're like, all right, we're going to move on, play another game.
That's right. Except for here, Martin's not going to be doing that because there are no more games to play for him if Greg wins this one. Greg is considering if he wants to cast out right now to take care of Hazoret the Fervent, or if it's better to just let Martin resolve a duress.
Yeah. So no card draw here. He will not, Greg Orange will not be drawing a card this turn. And now this duress will nab a Settle the Wreckage out of Greg Orange's hand, but he still has that Torrential Gear Hulk in hand, which he can't cast this turn, but next turn he can use it, to either counter more spells or draw more cards, as he does have that Glimmer of Genius in his graveyard.
Martin's going to use the activated ability of Hazoret with that cast out on the stack to get in for a couple of damage, discarding the Ether Hub. But in the meantime, cast out resolves, and Martin sees not a lot of great news on the other side there with the Settle the Wreckage, the Essence Scatter, but most importantly, the Torrential Gear Hulk that Martin cannot take with duress.
Did he not attack with Pianalar? Or did he already attack this turn?
No, I think he just declined to attack.
Yeah, he was going to get in for 2 with P.
Maybe he didn't want to. No, he just missed the attack, I guess.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Well, that's not good.
It doesn't make his job easier, though. I don't think it will affect the outcome of this game, given the situation that Martin is in.
Right.
Gear Hulk into Settle here really quells Martin's hopes of a comeback.
Yeah, I think we're just...
No way for Martin to stop that either, right? Can't get the Gear Hulk out of hand.
Right, not with the duress.
Right.
I mean, this Scrap Heap Scrounger is very, very annoying with that active Pianalar, and Martin Jůza choosing not to attack with it. Martin does have the ability to sacrifice the Scrap Heap Scrounger with the Pianalar, if he so chooses. If Greg Orange casts something like a Settle the Wreckage.
Greg is seriously considering casting Torrential Gear Hulk here, but he seems a bit indecisive about it. And what are we just going to Glimmer? Or does he actually need to settle to get rid of that thing?
He might be ahead enough where he does opt to go for Glimmer here. He really just wants to find a Search for Escanta or a Teferi to try to close out the game.
Yeah, that's what he's going to do.
He can even trade down, like trade a Gear Hulk for...
There's a Teferi.
For the Scrounger is really not the end of the world.
Yeah, he put 2 lands on the bottom of the battle of his 2 lands on the bottom of his library, but found land Teferi. That's kind of the death knell there. We were waiting to see how long it would take him to find a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, basically his win condition in the deck, and he's found it.
Look at that. That's +3/+0. And he blocks.
Pianalar is doing work this game.
I know.
Yeah, no kidding. And we see what Martin drew for the turn. It's Karizev Skyship Raider, but doesn't look up to the task.
No.
There's a Fumigate, too, in Greg Orange's hand, which he's likely going to cast this turn. And
just
Martin
both?
Right. And Martin Jůza cannot return Scrap Heap Scrounger this turn.
Greg Orange is putting on a show for us here. He loves playing control decks. You will often see him playing blue-white something at any GP or Pro Tour that he's playing in, and boy, has that practice paid off for him here, because he's been putting on a clinic. He is up 2-1 over the Hall of Famer Martin Jůza, and it feels like he's just about to complete the match and give
Hazoret, maybe? Hazoret here would be good.
Well, Greg actually is waiting for the Hazoret with an Essence Scatter in hand.
Oh, right, okay. And now he has a Steal Away on top of that.
He does have that Chandra to worry about, but it's not a pressing concern. I think with Teferi in play, you're pretty safe. You can just shelve the Chandra and deal with her later.
That's the third one. Yeah.
1, 2, and there she is on top of the library again.
And keep in mind.
Oh, he's got a replacement Teferi. He's just going to immediately cash in that first Teferi, put him in the yard, and draw a card. He's got quite a few lands going on. That Arch of Araska, though, could come in handy.
He's almost to the point where he can double activate Arch of Araska with the fairy.
I feel like the double activating arches is just kind of rub-ins.
We have seen
Win
him
in
do
style. Win in style. He has done it before.
Yeah, we've seen him do the double activation with the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. But
So Martin has a sequence here that could get him out of this. There's a seal away there, but if he flips Duress to Chandra, takes the seal away, attacks Teferi, it's a lot to ask, but you know it is not a 0%.
So is Chandra currently on top of Martin's library?
no. All right.
Chandra's
Lost
the second card down.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an unknown card in between. Is it Duress?
Here we go. What is it?
It's
Okay.
Bomat Courier.
Might as well play it.
At least it has haste. And Greg is having none of it. He's going to use that Essence Scatter right now.
And is this getting settled?
Seal away.
Oh, seal away, right.
Yeah. And that's going to protect Teferi and make it so that the Scrap Heap Scrounger's not coming back anytime soon.
He could have also chosen to use Field of Ruin to make sure that Martin doesn't draw the other Chandra. And then...
Just to force the shuffle.
Right. But he can also still do that this turn
I think
with
he's going to
with
shuffle
Teferi.
both Chandras away.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, really? Because he is drawing Chandra this turn.
Okay, you know, Greg Orange is almost out of resources. If Martin can find a way to deal with this Teferi.
Ugh, he's putting on a show.
Yep.
This is a forced shuffle as well.
Well, if Martin draws a Hazard or Glorybringer or On-Crop Crasher or one of the haste creatures to kill that Teferi, he still has to worry about that Arch of Araska. That card has done a lot this game for Greg. It's only drawn him 2 cards, but that's 2 cards in a game where he is getting a little flooded. And so that's a pretty big difference.
But in order for Martin to win, he needs to draw relevant spells.
Boy.
Multiple relevant spells in a row.
Unlicensed Disintegration, not what he wanted to see off the top of the library there.
And that's a
That's
Glimmer.
going to cascade from there. The Arch into Glimmer, into Scry to the bottom, to draw 2, into untap, Teferi my Arch. Yeah, like we're going to get into the realm that Paul was talking about where you're drawing with Arch and then Teferiing the Arch.
No worries. Not jealous here.
Hey, if you're going to flood out, you might as well have some place to put all that mana. And this one is well and firmly in hand for Greg Orange. He's going to pick up the match against Martin Jůza.
Are we going to see the main phase activation of the Arch?
I think so. I think that this match for the Pro Tour Finals is really going to come down to Ben Hull versus Ben Stark. Because if Ben Stark can come back from his 2-1 deficit, he's got to feel pretty good about the fact that Josh is up 2-1 in a favorable post-board matchup. But he has to do that first, and Ben Hull gets to be on the play, even if Ben Stark has somehow manages to win a game.
Look at this Arch going to town.
Yeah, that Arch is golden right now. It is just drawing him card after card.
Now, Luis, the finals here, besides what we know is on the line with all the prize money and the trophy, has implications for Team Channel Fireball beyond this, does it not?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm definitely hanging on every play because if they win, then we are in the Team Series Finals.
Not sure.
But it's going to be an uphill battle for Team Channel Fireball from here. So we're going to see, because it looks like Greg Orange is kind of cleaning things up here. This is more of a formality than it is a game at this point. Like, look, he just flipped Search for Azcanta. He's basically gets to draw his whole deck.
Yeah. And after sideboard, very likely that Greg Orange brought in some copies of Lyra Dawnbringer to actually be able to close out the game. And also Teferi Emblem also has the ability to end the game. As we saw in the previous game, Greg Orange used Teferi's Emblem to basically put Martin Jůza to 0 permanence.
Yeah, and once again, this is a team tournament. You're playing for your teammates, and as such, Martin feels compelled to not concede because who knows what could happen.
Could be anything.
Pouring over Martin's deck list. Does he have a Banefire in his sideboard?
There were a decent amount of lists at the Pro Tour that did play 1 or 2 copies. I would have guessed specifically for this matchup.
I do not believe Martin.
He does not. He does not have a Banefire. But that would be dramatic. Wow.
Goblin Chain Whirler now for Jůza, though. We are very much going through the motions here on our back table as Greg Orange has really put on a clinic. And it's going to give Team Hotsauce Games a critical 1-0 lead here in the finals.
Oh, and
Oh boy, there's some action.
another hard counter here and disallow. And the writing is basically on the wall at this point. Greg Orange just needs to
Well,
find an
the writing was on the wall a while ago. Greg Orange is underlining it right
Yeah,
now, just
sure,
in
sure.
case someone
extra
can't see.
bold, extra underline. Just casually, like, yeah, I guess.
He's always like that. Greg's a
my,
very
my,
casual
hand,
dude.
my hand is too full.
He would say I'll counter that in the same tone of voice if he was countering a spell when he was dead on board.
It's true.
Right.
He's just a chill guy. Got a discard?
I'll just tap float a mana on top and move to discard.
Greg's funny. Martin Jůza in that not so great position of knowing he's going to lose, but not really having any incentive whatsoever to concede. So he just has to sit here and watch.
Yeah, Greg, at this point, not even opting to draw cards off the Search for Ascanta or the Arch of Araska, as his hand just has all of the answers.
Yeah, he basically wants to get to the point where he emblems Teferi, exiles all of Martin's lands, and then starts looping Teferis.
Yep. And he has that ability next turn. This is just going to get countered by something.
I'll respond to the trigger, I guess.
I guess.
Greg. Sure.
I guess I'll do this. All right.
Okay. I keep doing the other thing. Yeah.
I guess I'll emblem Teferi.
Yeah.
I guess I'll
just,
draw cards.
Play another Teferi, exile your dual land.
Team Channel Fireball has not had a high win rate in games where their opponents have Planeswalker emblems.
Something you guys might want to shore up for your next tournament.
I think historically, people don't have a high win rate when their opponents have Planeswalker
Weaknesses,
emblems.
And
Planeswalker
that
emblems.
will, in fact, do it. Martin Jůza extends the hand, and Greg Orange takes down the match 3-1 and puts Team Hotsauce Games in a very good position to win the Pro Tour. But they're not done yet. They're facing down 2 Hall of Famers. And it's not going to be so easy against these, against the Ben Stark and against the Josh Utter-Leyton. The truth is that Josh is still in a favorable position with a decent matchup post-board and up a game over Alan Wu. And this is the match that really matters right now. Ben Stark versus Ben Hull, because Ben Hull is up 2-1. And if he can have one of those draws like he had in the first game.
Yeah,
Ben Stark dodged a bullet here. Ben Hull's draw for turn 1. Leyland of the Void.
yeah, I saw that.
Ooh, one off, huh?
Yeah, and Ben's hand looks quite strong
Which
here.
Ben?
Oh, right. Ben Stark's hand looks
Well,
quite
Ben
strong.
Stark doesn't have a second land, but he does have a Mox Opal. And actually, he might make the play of, just playing a bunch of mana rocks here. And he has to decide whether he wants to play the Pirate Spellbomb and show it or start cracking of stars
he
to
can
try to
start-
find a second land.
Right, right.
Looks like he's going to prioritize finding a land. And he did.
And then now he gets to use the Pirate Spellbomb to take out the Flame-Bladed Owl.
Wow, that worked out really well for Ben Stark. He's down a mana source on the Opal, but you got to figure that he can replace that next turn anyway. And those Flame-Blade Adepts are really pesky against this deck that Ben's playing because he just doesn't have a great way to interact outside of that Spell Bomb, and they can pile up 4, 8, 11 damage in the first few turns of the game pretty easily. Faithless Looting.
All right, how many hollow ones do we have here? He's now discarded 4 cards, so any hollow ones in his hand will be free.
Seems to be the big question. I know that he didn't get any of them with his draws there from the Faithless Looting, but I do believe he had one in his hand beforehand, so I think he's going to get just a hollow one on the battlefield.
Is that 2 gas?
2 Blood Gas into the
Wow.
graveyard as well.
So he decided to keep that Leyline of the Void in his hand.
So boom, went from 0 to 8 power on the battlefield. Just that one turn before passing it back to Ben.
And Ben is not have an active Mox Opal now, so if he wants to use it this turn, he is going to have to play a third artifact first.
Yeah, it looks like he's got a Nicker Wellspring here, which he could play, then follow that up with an Ancient Stirrings. He does need to find a Karklan Ironworks here.
And at some point, another land.
Yeah, that's kind of the tricky part, isn't it? Mox Opal now back online.
Yeah, are you supposed to sack the Chromatic Star here again?
Yeah, because if you draw a land off the star, it lets you take KCI off of the Ancient Stirrings.
He missed. He hit a Terrarian.
I do believe, though, if Ben sees Karklan Ironworks off this Ancient Stirrings, he's just going to take it and hope to draw a land.
Okay, that is not the case, but he did hit a land.
So he's just going to play the land here. And does he have any additional ways to find the Ironworks?
He doesn't. But so Ben, I think with a Mirror Retriever and a Scrap Trawler in hand, Ben's in pretty good shape to go off next turn if he draws land. Though Ben Hull does have an Ancient Grudge in hand.
Wait, you said he's in good shape to go off next turn if he draws a land?
If it draws an Ironworks.
An Ironworks, okay. Bang, 8 damage from Ben Hull. Knocks Stark down to 12. And he's just going to play a Flameblade Adept. So it could be a lot worse there from Stark's perspective. Is this an Ironworks? No, it was a land.
Yeah, this is currently not lethal damage. We're looking at 9 damage on the battlefield, but Ben Hull does have that Faithless Looting in the graveyard, which would put 2 additional discard triggers on the Flameblade Adept, which would then make it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 damage. Ben Stark currently sitting at 12. He does have a Mirror Retriever in hand, which he could use to block, but Ben Hull does have that Ancient Grudge to get it out of the way if he so chooses.
Ben Hull facing down Ben Stark, and if he wins this game, we're done here. Team Hot Sauce will be your Pro Tour 25th anniversary champions, knocking Channel Fireball not just out of this tournament, but out of the Team Series finals as well.
Yeah,
this is a huge game.
Just a combination of all this pressure that this deck is capable of putting up on top of the disruption.
It's really impressive.
Well, Ben did draw a Psy, which is interesting because now he could play Psy and then play Mirror Retriever and make a couple blockers. So Psy was...
Oh, that was a really big draw.
A pretty solid draw there.
So he's going to get a free Thopter.
I'm done after that.
Judge is going to grab us a Thopter token there. But
so
that gives him 3 blockers now.
And now Ben doesn't have a great target for Ancient Grudge because he can kill Acre Wellspring or a Mirror Retriever, both pretty unappealing. Can kill a Thopter token or a Mox Opal. Ben has to be breathing a sigh of relief after that top deck.
Yeah, that Saya was really, really big. This does buy him an additional turn here.
Ben Hull consulting with Greg Orange.
And Ben Hull does not have the 4th land yet, so he doesn't have the ability to just cast Leyline of the Void. So Ben Stark needs Ben Hull to not draw an untapped land.
I think he drew a Blackcleave.
Did he have a Collective Brutality in his hand?
I believe he had...
was that Leyline of the Void?
He has the Leyline of the Void.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he actually drew a tap land. It might have been a 3rd Blackcleave Cliffs. No, I'm wrong. It was a Bloodstained Mire, Luis.
So, okay, he's got an Ancient Grudge in the graveyard and a Goblin Lore in hand, right? If he plays a Goblin Lore, the Flameblade Adept becomes a 5-powered creature. If he uses the Ancient Grudge of the Mirror Retriever, Sai is the only blocker. Sai would be able to block Hollow One, but Ben Hull would be able to get in for 9 points of damage with the 2 Bloodghast and the Flameblade Adept. That would also force Ben Stark to chump block with Sai this turn.
Well, Ben would actually, I think, just block a Bloodghast and go to 1.
Oh, sure.
And then untap with Sai and play and have gotten a card back from Mirror Retriever. So I suspect Ben Hull's just going to play Leyline of the Void this turn. Because Leyline of the Void shuts off Mirror Retriever. I mean, it just really makes Ben Stark's whole deck a lot less effective.
So then Ben needs to string together not only Nature's Claim, but also Scrap Trawler and Karklan Ironworks.
There's Leyline of the Void. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere exiled, the ones that are there get to stay. Ben's going to make a block that lets him survive the turn, but barely. He's down to 5. He keeps Mirror Retriever, but boy, he needs to find a lot of action or make a lot of Thopters to keep staying alive.
If Ben can
land off the top.
If Ben Stark can find a Nature's Claim, I think he's actually in a commanding position. That side does buy him a lot of time, but he without that, a lot of his cards get a lot less value.
That was an Inventor's Fair.
Right, that does allow him to go find Krark-Clan Ironworks. A little bit expensive to activate.
He'll have to survive another attack step from Ben Hull.
Right, and with the Leyline of the Void on the battlefield, those Ichor Wellsprings will not draw Ben cards, correct?
Correct. None of Ben's cards really work with Leyline. Scrap Trawler, Mirror Retriever, and Ichor Wellspring, none of them have death triggers.
So now what? He got to make 2 Thopters and play the Scrap Trawler to add to the board. Here's Goblin Lore for Ben Hull. And we're going to roll some dice and see what happens.
Could be anything.
It's difficult for Stark to die this turn, though, right? With all the creatures he's got?
It is unlikely that Ben Stark dies this turn, but he's going to start losing board position as the game continues.
Okay, so it's really down to him finding himself a Nature's Claim in the next turn or two?
I think if Ben Stark finds a Nature's Claim, he's in very good shape. Because Sai plus all the value, he gets to sack Ichor Wellsprings to Sai, and draw, he gets to draw 3 cards off sacking 2 Ichor Wellsprings. He'll end up finding more artifacts, which make more blockers, which keep him alive, and the loop continues. But he still is in a pretty tough position here.
He's going to be losing material on each of these attack steps, but if he can get lucky, tap the top of the library, and find himself a Nature's Claim, he may be able to go off, even facing down all this pressure. Ben Stark cools a Cucumber.
There's a Faithless Looting as well, so now that Flameblade Adept is currently a 5-powered creature, with Goblin Lore making him discard 3, Faithless Looting making him discard 2. So 6-power creature.
And he does have to dedicate 2 blockers to it as it has Menace. So yeah, Ben Stark's board is.
There's a chance that last turn Ben wanted to double block the Flameblade Adept with a Thopter and Sai because no cards were discarded. This turn he can double block it with Thopters.
He'll lose both,
right.
basically,
But he'll lose
no matter
both.
what,
So,
yeah.
so now with the land, he does have the ability to put a Bloodghast onto the battlefield here.
That also has haste.
Yeah, Ben Stark is at lower than 10 life, which does trigger the Bloodghast, as you can see on the screen here.
And that Grudge is still floating in the graveyard. So even if Ben Stark double blocks the Adept with 2 creatures that can kill it, Ben Hull can grudge one of them and mess things up. So what Ben might actually do here is kind of what he's lining up now, which is he could potentially line up blocks to double block and kill Hollow One, double block and kill Flameblade, and then if Ben Hull wants, he can save one of the 2 with the Grudge.
You're looking for it is a bunch of Faithless Lootings. All the Faithless Lootings.
Yeah, so Ben has to find a Nature's Claim. Ben has to find a Nature's Claim to get the Leyline of the Void off the board, and also has to fight through an active Ancient Grudge, as Ben Hull currently has a Stomping Ground untapped as well.
Well, and if he loses the Retriever and the Trawler, that shuts off a lot of his engines, even if he finds the claim, right?
Yeah.
Correct. And what Ben wants to do, if that ends up happening, is Ben Stark wants to draw Chromatic Sphere, because Sphere draws you a card through Leyline of the Void.
Right.
Spheres and Ichor Wellsprings can chain making Thopters and maybe buy Ben Stark a couple more looks and a couple more turns to find Nature's Claim for Leyline, at which point he really needs those Ichor Wellsprings to yield some action.
So now putting Ben Hull to the test. Will Ben Hull use an Ancient Grudge here to let one of his creatures survive? He has the ability to flashback Ancient Grudge to get rid of either the Scrap Trawler or the Mirror Retriever or one of those cards to get one of his creatures to survive. But it looks like he's happy with the trade here. Or they're talking through it.
I think they really do want to Grudge here. Because if you let this happen, you end up with 2 Bloodghasts against Sai. And that's not actually that fast of a clock.
Right.
Yeah, you might have claim.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
He's like, no, I don't have it.
I don't have claim.
You lose Hollow 1, you lose Blood Gas. I take 2, I'm at 3.
All right, Ben Stark down to 3 life.
He gets to gain a life off Inventor's Fair.
Ben Hall has 4 Faithless Lootings in his graveyard as well.
Trigger Inventor's Fair. Go back up to 4. Draw a card for the turn. What is
this?
it? He needs something to get going.
It's an island.
He found a land.
So he can sack Inventor's Fair and get a 1-mana artifact. Or a 2-mana artifact, actually like an Ichor Wellspring.
Yeah, he can get that.
Ben is not quite at the point where he can sacrifice his Inventor's Fair to get Engineered Explosives to kill the Adept this turn.
He can also sack the Wellsprings to draw a card off the Sai's ability. He will not draw the cards for the Ichor Wellsprings going into the graveyard, but Sai does have an ability where if you pay 2 mana and sack 2 artifacts, you can draw a card.
Okay, here goes the Inventor's Fair. Yeah, Ben wants to take an extra second here to make sure that he does exactly the right thing. He has 0 wiggle room. His teammates are looking to him to try to win this game and still has work to do to win the match if he can pull that off. Or else we're looking at our champions, Team Hot Sauce.
Yeah, and getting Mirror Retriever is actually important here because if Ben doesn't get Mirror Retriever, he'll only have 2 blockers. He'll be forced to double block the... Oh, no, he'll go to 1. He could double block the 2 Bloodghasts and not block the Flameblade. Oh, he's going to get a Pirate Spellbomb to kill the Flameblade.
Ooh.
Leaving himself...
With a Thopter and a Sai, and he can
Against
use
2
the Pyrite Spellbomb to get the Flameblade Adept off the board.
All right, so this gives Ben a puncher's chance here because the problem is for Ben Stark is that Ben Hull has a ley line, which means that Ben Stark, a lot of his cards don't work, and Ben Hull has 4 Faithless Looting, so even if he draws a brick, he gets to looting every turn.
Right.
Oh, yeah, Ben Hull has a lot of action lined up.
Yeah, keep in mind, he still has 4 copies of Faithless Looting in his graveyard here. He has lots of good draws here.
Draws his card for the turn.
And he's got a fetch land on the battlefield. He's got a Bloodstained Mire with a Bloodghast in yard, so he can choose to return a Bloodghast here if he wants. If he gets Faithless Lootings, finds additional Bloodghast, he can do that.
If I'm tapped out, I'm an F6. Do your thing.
Ben Stark just says, look, man, kill me if you're going to kill me. I'm not going to be responding.
And that was not the worst. Ben Hull actually found a Hollow 1 off that Faithless Looting, meaning that he can play it for 1 mana as he's already discarded 2 cards. And there probably isn't a huge reason here to fetch for the Bloodghast, right? Because you're just basically trading off a Bloodghast for a Thopter, and then you have a Sai.
Or Ben just takes it. He just eats a Bloodghast with Sai and then takes 2 damage. So
yeah, so Hull's just going to pass the turn back. What can Ben Stark find? Another land off the top of the library. He's drawn back-to-back lands.
So I think we're at the play Darksteel Citadel and eat Mox Opal plus Darksteel Citadel.
With Sai.
With Sai to draw a card.
To try to draw artifacts. Darksteel Citadel will not, in fact, trigger Sai, Master Thopterist, as you need to actually cast the spell.
Ben deciding maybe if he wants to float a green off the Mox, perhaps, or if he doesn't want to play his land for the turn.
All right.
Ben Stark trying to piece together a miraculous comeback here.
He needs action here. Looked like it was an artifact.
It was. I couldn't see which one it was, though.
Terrarian.
Okay.
Or maybe it was
Oh, it's
BCF.
Ironworks?
It was Krark-Clan Ironworks. Now, remember, Leyline of the Void is still there, so does that really do much here?
Well, if Ben Hull wants to kill it with Ancient Grudge, Ben Stark can sack it plus it for 2 mana and then use Sai's ability, maybe. It doesn't do a whole lot. It mostly makes a Thopter token.
It's a Burning Inquiry off the top.
You know, this isn't untenable for Ben Stark. He is going to see a lot of new cards, over the course of the next couple turns because almost all the cards in his deck make flying blockers. Though the Phoenix there is going to be a Flamewick Phoenix is going to be pretty effective. That Ben did not want to see.
Wow, so this is a lot of damage. Ben is going to go down to 2 here and he'll make all the chump blocks that he needs to. Now what he can do is he can sack a Wellspring for mana, and then sack both of the Thopters to draw a card with Psy Master.
I believe he should do that. It's basically sacking a Wellspring to draw a card, which you don't always have the option to do.
I don't know if it's better to have 2 looks at Nature's Claim or an extra Wellspring in play, because they don't have a lot of resources to go off with.
So Ben's also, you can hear him chatting, and he's saying, look,
I mean,
he's
aware
not
of
just
this.
thinking about surviving, right? He's also thinking about, if I do hit the Nature's Claim, I still need to try to win this game after that.
So it's like I can have 2 cracks at a claim, or I can have an extra Wellspring in play if I feel it.
Yeah, Ben trying to figure out the best course of action here, because he does need to play to drawing an Nature's Claim here. Down to very few resources. He now just has a Karklan Ironworks, a Psy, and an Ichor Wellspring.
He hasn't looked at the card yet. I saw a star. He still has that land in hand.
What's
Yeah,
that last
Ancient
card?
Stirrings. So he's not. The Leyline of the Void is not going to leave the battlefield.
I exiled this and drew 1 card because I activated Psy. I will give you a life.
All right, here's Ancient Stirrings, but you can't find Nature's Claim with that. So he could find just another artifact to make another Thopter.
Okay, so that's a Scrap Trawler. Just staying alive.
He is just hanging in there.
And he's got Scrap Trawler and Terrarion to play this turn. That'll give him so he will have 4 creatures on the battlefield, and Ben Hull can currently crack the Bloodstained Mire to get that Bloodghast out of the yard. But keep in mind, he does have multiple Faithless Lootings in the graveyard. Oh, and that's a Nature's Claim. Oh, sorry, an Ancient Grudge.
Ancient Grudge off the
think this
top
is lethal.
for Ben Hull. And Team Hot Sauce says, I can clear away both of the Thopters and kill you in the air. We have our champions, Team Hot Sauce Games. Ben Hull, Alan Wu, and Greg Orange have won. Josh Utter-Leyton comes in to give the handshake. But we've got our champions, Team Hot Sauce Games.
No, I know. I need to draw a claim. If I draw a claim, I win that game. If I don't, I lose. And I had it turn after turn.
So I did
the
an impressive
relief.
job there.
Yeah, definitely. Holding on to that Leyline of the Void. And you just saw just how much damage that card did. And, you know, going in, I think this, you know, Hollow One, KCI was kind of one of the newer decks that a lot of pro teams expected to be in the field because of all the success that it's had, thanks to Matt Ness. And a lot of people were ready for it. You saw more Rest in Pieces. You saw more Leyline of the Voids. You saw a lot more Graveyard Hate because, you know, this deck is one of the premier decks in the format.
He was a lot more better positioned about a month ago because you wouldn't play against Hollow One and see like 8 sideboard cards, for example.
Right.
Or play against Blue White and see like Rest in Peace plus Stony Silence.
Yeah.
Wow, what an edge of your seat marathon that was in the finals. But we do have our champions. It's Team Hot Sauce Games. Runners up, Team Channel Fireball. Great stuff from everybody down in the feature match area. We're going to sign off from here in the booth. Luis Scott Vargas, Paul Chian, and me, Marshall Sutcliffe. Let's send it back to the news desk and Rich Hagan.
Thanks very much, Marshall. With Maria, with Simon, of course. Well, there we go. I mean, getting across the finish line, Simon, was an epic event, as we just saw. Sigh after sigh after sigh. The Thopters kept on coming. But in the end, no Nature's Claim for Ben Stark.
This final game was something to watch, and you could feel how behind they were, but fighting. In the end, it wasn't enough.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to watch a bunch of really tight moments across those games there. That Legacy game, I think, is going to be one people are going to be talking about for a long time. Right, Simon?
Yeah, I think Josh has really put on a clinic with this Death Shadow deck. I love it.
Yeah, and I think, again, we saw the 3 lanes, the 3 formats, and Josh Utter-Leyton. We saw yesterday Mattia Rizzi be a real star in the modern seat. And I think throughout the 3 days, we've seen Josh Utter-Leyton be a real star in the Legacy seat, not just because of the way he played. But remember, that's essentially his deck, his concoction. Obviously, a lot of people contributed to that. I know Andy Beckstrom was involved and so on. But just an immense weekend from the Hall of Famer Josh Utter-Leyton.
He needed one of his teammates to win. That's I have no doubt that he would have won his match. So
Yeah, I was going to say, too, Greg Orange putting on a control clinic as well.
For sure, yeah, in that seat, and 3-1 over Martin Jůza with the red-black aggro deck. Luis talked to us, here at the desk and said, look, the plan today was that Josh's deck was amazing, Josh was amazing, he was in great position, expected him to dominate, and then they hoped that they would get one win out of either Stark or Jůza in the right order, as it were, one in each match. And in the end, couldn't quite get there. And that is team play. You can't win alone.
yeah, and even with all the Thopters being generated, if there is a ley line, I said it in the beginning of the tournament, the players in Modern are going to be prepared for graveyard strategies, and KCI is an artifact graveyard strategy. Then sometimes you have to accept that there are cards that just beat you.
Now, talking of being beaten, Channel Fireball, by finishing second here, that means they just fall short in the race for the Team Series Championship. And that means 6 incredible players, Andrew Cuneo, John Finkel, Paul Rietzel, William Jensen, Reed Duke, and Owen Turtenwald will go to the Team Series Championship, and they will face Harry Latin, who've had an amazing weekend, Marcio Carvalho, Thiago Saporito, Carlos Romao, who of course were in the Final Four, and then Lucas Esperberto, Luis Salvato, and Sebastian Pozzo. Those are the 12 players who go to our next team event, the Team Series Championship in Las Vegas. So congratulations to them. Commiserations, John Emmanuel Depraz, Kelvin Chu, because that means they are on the outside looking in to the World Championship. Ben Stark and Martin Jůza claiming the last 2 at-large berths by not winning. They drop into the at-large segment. So that more or less wraps up things away from the top 4. But Maria, why don't we take a look at the bracket?
Yes, let's take a look at where our tournament brought us today and what a tournament it's been in our semifinals. Of course, the team that ended up winning it all, Wu, Hull, and Orange, against the Belgians, Gregoire, Nijrink, and Vanderpelt, which is really cool story too as well, Rich, because they were an RPTQ team and we had an all Hall of Fame team. We had them both in our top 4, and I think that's so awesome.
Yeah, and although they were RPTQers, make no mistake, Gregoire, Nijrink, and Vanderpelt are very, very good. Simon, you're at almost all the European Grand Prix, either playing or commentating. And Christophe Gregoire straddles those generations. He is both of our generation of the mid-2000s playing competitively, and now again with this younger brigade.
Didn't know we belong to the same generation, Rich. Christophe Gregoire has been active on the Pro Tour as I was active. Branko Nijrink is one of the up-and-coming stars with a lot of Pro Tour experience as well. Thomas van der Belt hasn't played on as many Pro Tours, but he knows how to play standard and other constructed formats.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that all 3 of them at every European GP, they are super calm. They are not the kind of player that you can tilt. They are not the sort of player who you can get under the skin of at all. They are just very, very rock solid European pros, and obviously a big weekend for them. And then the bottom half, which was, I guess, the flagship semi-final, Hall of Famers all the way, Josh, Ben and Martin, and then this fantastic team of Harry Latin. But it is Wu, Hull and Orange who win. Let's head down for the award ceremony from Pro Tour Magic 25th anniversary.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the feature match area here at Pro Tour 25th Anniversary. In an edge of your seat finals, we have our champions. Alan Wu, Ben Hull, and Gregory Orange from Team Hot Sauce Games. All right, guys, you are our champions. Tell us how this team came together, Greg.
Well, me and Ben were in Team Hot Sauce, and then Ben, you got Alan to be on the team, right?
Yeah, he wasn't gonna go to the PT, but then he was kind of changing his mind, and he mentioned this in group chat. I'm like, he's the best Magic player I know, so on the team.
And what about you, Alan?
Yeah, I was pretty sure I was going to skip this Pro Tour because I wasn't super excited about playing any of the formats, but then Deathrite Shaman got banned, and I wanted to play Legacy again, and yeah, Ben asked me if I wanted to play it, I did.
So coming into the tournament early on, you knew you were going to be facing some of the best teams in the world, and in fact, in the finals, you faced one of the best teams in the world. What was your mindset going into the finals?
Well, it's like, we already beat them once, just got to do it again.
Well, do it again you did, and now you're all 3 Pro Tour champions. Congratulations once again to the team from Hotsauce Games, Alan Wu, Ben Hull, and Gregory Orange.